The rain had been going since mid-afternoon, and by the time Marcus knocked on my door, it was the kind of evening where the whole world smells like wet pavement and second thoughts. He was my neighbor's brother, 20-something, broad-shouldered, the kind of guy who probably hadn't been to a doctor since he was old enough to pretend he didn't need one. He was holding his arm against his chest, like it had personally offended him, and his jacket was soaked through. My neighbor Priya had texted me 20 minutes earlier. "He's being an idiot. Please help him. He won't go to urgent care." I opened the door, took one look at him, and said, "You're dripping on my welcome mat." He said, "I know. I'm sorry. Priya said you're a nurse." "Nursing student," I corrected. "Come in." He came in. He dripped. He stood in my kitchen looking like a man who deeply regretted every decision that had led him to this moment, which, honestly, is a very relatable energy. His name was Marcus. He'd been helping a friend move furniture, which, if you have ever helped a friend move furniture, you already know where this is going. Something heavy, something awkward, a door frame that won the argument. He'd caught a gash on his forearm on a metal bracket, and then, this is the part that got me, he'd spent the next 4 hours convincing himself it was fine. It was not fine. It wasn't dangerous either, but it needed proper cleaning, it needed closure strips, and it needed someone to actually look at it instead of wrapping it in a paper towel and hoping for the best, which is what he had done. I had him sit at my kitchen table. I got my kit. I keep a real one, not a cute little first aid box, an actual organized kit with saline and sterile gauze and gloves and everything I'd need for something like this. I pulled on my gloves, and that small snap of latex against my wrist is one of those sounds that just shifts something in me, like a switch. I stop being the girl who lives in apartment 4B, and I become someone who knows what she's doing. He watched me pull on the gloves, and his jaw tightened slightly. "You're nervous," I said. "I'm not nervous," he said, which is exactly what nervous people say. "It's okay if you are," I told him. "Most people are. It's actually a completely reasonable response to sitting in a stranger's kitchen while she puts on gloves." That made him laugh, a little. Just enough. The shoulders dropped maybe half an inch. The wound was about 3 centimeters long, not deep, but ragged at the edges, the way metal tends to leave things. I cleaned it with saline first, slowly, not rushing, because rushing is how you miss things. You irrigate a wound like this gently, letting the solution do the work, not scrubbing. Scrubbing damages tissue and makes healing harder. I always tell people that. They always want to scrub. They think clean means aggressive. It doesn't. While I worked, I talked to him, not about the wound, about the rain, about whether he'd ever actually helped a friend move and had it go well. He said once, in college, and I said that probably didn't count because in college everything is easier, and also you're invincible. He said, I thought I was still invincible. I said, the door frame had a different opinion. He had a really good laugh, low and a little surprised, like he hadn't expected to be laughing right now. I noticed that. I noticed things like that. The wound was clean. I used closure strips, those little butterfly strips that pull the edges together without sutures. And I placed them carefully, with tension but not too much, because you want approximation, not puckering. You start from the center of the wound and work outward. That's the trick most people don't know. You don't start at one end and march to the other. You find the middle. You close it there first. Then you work in both directions. It gives you control. It gives you symmetry. He watched my hands while I worked. I could feel him watching. "Does it hurt?" I asked. "Not really," he said. "Your hands are warm." I didn't say anything to that, but I noted it. Here's the thing about wound care that nobody tells you until you've seen it go wrong. The first 24 hours matter most. You keep it covered, you keep it dry. You watch for the signs: redness spreading beyond the wound edges, warmth that increases instead of decreasing, swelling that gets worse instead of better, any discharge that isn't clear. Those are your signals that something's happening underneath the surface, and those are the signals that mean you stop waiting and you go in. I told him all of this. He listened, which surprised me a little. Men his age, and I say this with full affection, sometimes get a glazed look when you start talking about wound care protocol. But he was listening. He was watching my face the way people watch you when they're actually taking something in. I also checked his temperature, just because. He'd been out in the rain, he looked a little flushed, and I had a thermometer. Slightly elevated. Not alarming, but worth noting. I told him to take something for it if it climbed, drink water, eat something warm, and if it hit 38.5 Celsius, or about 101.3 in Fahrenheit, to take it seriously and not just decide he was fine again. He said, "You sound like my mom." I said, "Your mom sounds smart." He said, "She is. She's a doctor." I paused. "And you still didn't go to urgent care?" He had the decency to look slightly ashamed. I was wrapping his forearm in a light gauze layer, not tight, just protective, to keep the strips in place overnight, when he said quietly, "Thank you. I mean it. I know you didn't have to do this." "I know," I said. "Priya said you'd help. She said you always help." I smoothed the tape at the edge of the gauze, and I thought about that for a second. She said you always help. There are worse things to be known for. "Come back in 2 days," I said. "I want to check the edges, make sure they're holding." He said he would. He stood up, and he was taller than I'd registered when he was sitting, and he looked at me for a beat, just a beat, with an expression I couldn't quite name. Not quite gratitude. Something quieter than that. Something that happens when a person has been taken care of, and they're not quite sure what to do with that feeling. I walked him to the door. The rain had softened to something almost gentle. He said, "I'll bring coffee when I come back, as a thank you." I said, "I take mine with oat milk." He smiled. Noted. I stood at the window after he left and watched him walk down the steps, his jacket still damp, his arm wrapped clean and neat against his side. The streetlight caught the puddles on the sidewalk and made them look like something worth painting. There's a moment in care, and I've felt it dozens of times now, in clinicals, in small acts like this one, in the middle of the night on a shift when someone reaches for your hand without thinking. There's a moment where the distance between two people just isn't there anymore. Not because anything happened, just because one person was vulnerable and the other person showed up. That's the whole thing, really. That's all of it. I pulled off my gloves, folded them neatly, and dropped them in the bin. And I thought, 2 days, oat milk. Some things are worth waiting for.